And so a lot of times health stuff becomes very individualized and we can play that blame game on people, but so much around us is going to shape what we can do or, what's available to us. And so I think that perspective is really important to keep in mind. Instead of asking people, how much do you exercise per day or how much do you walk, we should ask them, where do you walk? Because we might find out that they don't have anywhere good to walk, right? Just giving one example as to how we can open up that perspective.
So who are you and what are you currently working on?
Great. So hi, Paul. Thanks for having me. I'm Rumi Chunara. I'm an associate professor at NYU, and I'm in two schools, engineering and public health. So that's a little bit unique, but it really demonstrates kind of my research interest, which are to look at how we're developing new technologies and specifically machine learning, artificial intelligence, and to do so from a lens which incorporates all the knowledge that we have from the public health side and to improve that the goals in relation to public health as well. So that's a broad overview. And then the kinds of projects I'm working on, we're going to talk about a little bit more, but a lot of them involve like looking at data that we collect, interrogating and see how it's going to be useful for us to make some big changes.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was quite spot on. So what were you thinking about that led you to this moment?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. I mean, we're data people in my group and my center. So we're always looking at kind of the new data sources becoming available, and especially on the image side, that's a potentially exciting area because when we see environments, we see the places that shape us, right? Our health. And so, our group is doing a lot of work on things like satellite imagery, but also street view imagery. Now, it has become very common and available in many cities around the world. I think over 100 cities. And we've seen some research using the data, which is exciting and the promise of it. When it comes down to how it's being used, sometimes we found that maybe folks coming from the computer science side who are more fluid with this and literate with this type of data might not have that public health knowledge, which we also bring in, which shows us that if we know the environments, that's important to drive our health, but we also need to know how people are going to use them and how we're going to, like, for example, kind of a physical activity we'll have. And so we found that missing from a lot of those studies. They would just look at data at face value around the city, not thinking about how is it collected? Was it representing all the different places correctly? And then also not thinking about this kind of usage as well that we know kind of mediates that effect of how our environments are and how our health is going to be. So we found that was a pretty big gap and we wanted to bring some attention to this.
How relevant do you think this subject matter is connecting to what is happening in the bigger scheme of things in the tech ecosystem?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I think, the time, not to toot my own horn, but I think the timing is pretty good because coming from the research side, people come up with new ideas, and a lot of that is being ingested now through companies, through governments, through other organizations, and to turning it into action. And so, by showing this, what we found from Google Street View, we have the opportunity to inform Google or other companies that are collecting Street View data to maybe how they can do that in a manner that'll better support public health decision making. So it's right on, I think, timely, and we look forward to engaging with groups to better do that.
Yes. So tell me, as simple as possible, what did you do?
Yes. It's a great question. We took a look at all the street view data from Google in New York City, which is usually collected by cars going around with cameras. You might have even seen one going by your own apartment or house. And first thing we looked at was where all that data is being captured and around the city. And when you run it through the Google algorithms that assign like labels to it, to like say like in this image, there was a road or there was a crosswalk, we looked at how that corresponds to kind of ground truth. What, are the labels coming up correctly in different places? We found some issues that they have in terms of miscategorizing certain kinds of sidewalks. So we found that. And then the second thing we did was look at that Google, those like sidewalk and other types of labels from the images and how that relates to how healthy people are in different parts of the city. And we found that some of that relationship is actually dependent on how active people are in those different places. And so if we just change one of those things, like we move the needle on the sidewalks in different places, it's not enough. We also have to consider about maybe encouraging people to move more. That might be more bang for our buck in terms of making some changes in health.
Looking at the results now, what surprised you the most in your findings?
That's a good question. I mean, our findings were pretty surprising in that just how interrelated those things are. So, yeah, we know our environments shape us, but it's not enough to just think about those. Like, there was a significant portion that's really at like the person level as well, to like how much we're moving around, how much we're using those sidewalks and places to walk around. And so, just seeing how much those are interrelated, it was really a kind of shone a light on us on like this kind of like multi-level ways that things influence our health.
What does that mean?
That means that, it kind of speaks to the intertwinedness of like us and our environments. We all know about climate change and planetary health, and us and the what's around us is so intertwined. So it's not enough to just build an environment that's conducive to like exercising well or having healthy food, but we also have to make sure people know how to use it and kind of push that part of the well.
So now let's talk about robustness and accuracy and adapting the insights from these results into other places. So how can we apply this elsewhere, especially in places that could be slightly different or entirely different from the places where you targeted?
That's right. So our study was focused in New York City, where we are, and where there's a lot of data, there's a lot of people also. But definitely things like Street View data are becoming more available in different places. And so it's definitely feasible to like take the same data, run the same type of analyses in different places. But I think the key is that we need people from those different places who understand the context, who know what it means for people moving around in a certain type of city. Are people exercising outside, or maybe they don't? And so I think that's part of what I would encourage us to think about as well, is how to get those people with the right skills, like not just the data science part, but also like learning about know about health and have that expertise, and people from that place to uncover what's happening in their surroundings.
So let's try and geek out around health outcome association. So what insights can you share that are of public health importance from your findings?
Yeah, so our findings were really focused on what people call non-communicable diseases. So not things that like spread person to person per se, although, if I'm healthy in some ways that helps my family. But yeah, so we focused on things like diabetes and obesity, which are growing a lot all over the world. And so that was kind of that was the outcome that we were looking at. And we were looking at how our environment and how much we move around can shape those conditions in the population.
One of the things that I think was quite obvious was the critical role of physical inactivity in probably in health outcomes. But sometimes, if we look at how people talk about someone that is minimally physically active, there is always this individual blame game approach. But something I find interesting is probably the way that societies are designed, communities are designed, would also play a significant way in probably encouraging or discouraging physical inactivities. Do you think from the findings in terms of physical inactivity from an individual point of view or from a society point of view, how do we balance this out?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And so a lot of times health stuff becomes very individualized and we can play that blame game on people, but so much around us is going to shape what we can do or what's available to us. And so I think that perspective is really important to keep in mind. Instead of asking people how much do you exercise per day or how much do you walk, we should ask them, where do you walk? Because we might find out that they don't have anywhere good to walk, right? Just giving one example as to how we can open up that perspective.
Absolutely. So, what about making street views even more health uh, health health compliant? So, what recommendations are you putting forward regarding available tools, or available insights, available data, enhancing an individual's positive health choices and outcomes?
Yes, I think there's definitely a lot of opportunities there, even from the basic part of where the data is collected, right? Is it representing all the communities around us? Oftentimes certain communities always get ignored, and even just looking at where the data is. Then how about where the labeling is happening from the AI system? Is it working the same way in different places? Or maybe sometimes, and maybe in a pattern, it's working incorrectly for certain places as well. So even all the way from data collection to data labeling, we can have a more health perspective because we'll know which communities might always be marginalized or what types of places might be more challenging for the system to label. So see how that health background is even integral to the data background, the data part of it, the AI part of it. And then all the way into like even the modeling that we did, knowing like what mediates, what's the causal model, we're knowing from the health side. So there's so many ways that integrating that health perspective would be advantageous.
Then I'm curious to know. There are loads of ways. My mind was going to a lot of places while I was going through your paper. But for you, as a person that worked on this research, what will you describe as the top contributions to knowledge that you think this work uh, is adding?
I mean, besides the obviously societally relevant contribution in terms of the findings regarding our environment and our physical activity and outcomes, it has students of different backgrounds coming together to really make that happen, right? They have different experiences from their skill set in image processing, public health, and I think it really took that synergy to make something happen. And I hope that's something that people can take away from this study as well, that there's real value to bringing those different minds together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm also curious to know, how do you desire this knowledge, this insights from your research to be applied? What do you think? What changes? What impact do you think the data that this research is having can actually make?
Yeah, we would love to have that kind of impact by maybe working with the industry who's like making new tools to collect data and sharing approaches to in order how to collect that in line with these types of efforts. We would love to translate this into like public health departments who could then use these findings to better target, interventions to bring up the community in different ways. So these are some examples that I think we are excited about next steps on for.
So what's next? What happens next for you and your team?
Great question. We're thinking about the same type of study in terms of different types. Like you can consider the street view as type of sensor, and the deep learning around it to identify objects as type of sensor. We're thinking about this for different types of data and different sensors that are related to that will provide information for health as well. So things like air pollution, like where we're sensing that. That's one example, and you'll have to stay tuned for more.
Okay, I'm curious to know, why New York? And would the results have been different, or would the inferences would have been different in other US city? Let's say a place like Oklahoma, or let's say California or elsewhere, or even if we take it international, a place like London or Cape Town. So are there restrictions to making inferences based on geolocation?
Right. So, yeah, I think it's a great question. Definitely, the results of the type of analysis could be different because the way people use their infrastructure, the type of infrastructure available could differ. And so it would need to be replicated. One reason that I think New York was a great exemplar for this type of work is that there is, first of all, a good amount of data, not just from the Google Street View side, but also the city does a good job of asking people different public health questions in their city-wide surveys. And as well, it's a pretty contained area where there's a high enough population where people are engaging in physical activity in the city this way. Places that maybe rural places, this might be a little bit different, the types of analyses you'd want to do and look at. But I think there's some good pieces that this study shows off that could be adapted for different places.
So I have an interesting exercise for you. Give anytime I interview scientists like this, I always try to challenge them to try and simplify their science for a little girl. So this is my little girl. You tell her what your research is, and I'll ask if she understood it.
Okay. Hi,
So go
what's your
for it.
name? Gift. Okay, nice to meet you. So yeah, so as a scientist, we worked on seeing like what makes people healthier, right? So like feeling better day to day, not having things like diabetes and obesity. These are things that make us tough for us to have a good life every day to day. And there's different things that can affect that. One is like how the place I live in how does that help me like stay healthy? Like go for walks or go for runs with my family or just walk to work. And so like that keeps me healthy. So looking at the environment, that's one factor. And then also like how much do I go outside, or do I choose to take a drive in my car, or some things that I might do differently. And so we looked at all those things, like what's outside in my city, how much I'm like moving around, and then how that relates to keeping me healthy. And we tried to show like what can I change to make everyone be healthier? I would try and, how does that sound, Gift? It's a good barometer. Yes.
Kids are they are too brutally honest, but I think you really did well, and I really understood it. So I think for me that was a really really great
Okay,
attempt. So
thanks.
thank you, thank you, thank you. I really enjoyed this. So thank you
Okay,
so much.
thanks, Paul.